Hello, this is the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Tickers, and on this episode, I'm talking to comedian and actor Patton Oswalt. Patton, you've had a very successful comedy career.
So far, yes.
And I'm wondering if you have any idea to what that is owed besides your sheer hard work.
It was I think anyone that is successful in any field of the creative arts, very, very early on, for at least the first 3 or 4 years, you let yourself. It is yes, it's hard work, but it's hard work that comes from absolute obsession with it. It's kind of all you want to do. I think Isaac Asimov said, if you want to become a successful writer, it sort of has to be all you want to do. But if you're, if you have like 5 free hours in the day and you're like, well, but I should go fold some laundry and maybe rearrange my shelves, then you're probably not going to be a successful writer. It's kind of just has to be all you want to be doing.
Right.
And
it's interesting that you mentioned writing, because obviously that's a huge part of stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really eager to talk to you about your writing process, because much of what you say on stage feels like stuff that you've workshopped in front of audiences and you have it, but I'm curious to know how much of that is on the page in the beginning and how much of it is workshopped over time.
A lot of it, very little of my stuff is actually worked out on the page. It is workshopped over time in front of audiences over and over and over again, because I want it to feel like it was something that I found conversationally, speaking to people, reacting with people. That's what I want it to have, that, because it just, in my experience, it lands more immediately with people and stays with them harder if it feels like it's an idea that came from trial and error, from conversation, rather than I wrote this out and now I am reading it and delivering it. It almost feels like the audience was left out of that whole process.
Yeah, and it has that feeling of like your really smart, funny friend who's telling you a story maybe for the second or third time. That's really,
yes.
He really knows.
Yeah, I want to, and you can sense when this is happening, when there's some significant thing that's happened and they've really, really boiled that story down,
right,
and they're not finding it in front of you, and they've learned to, they've become a good, I've had so many conversations with friends who, and it doesn't mean they're bad people. They just don't know how to tell a story.
Right.
And they've had some pretty significant things happen to them, but they don't know how to say it in a way that lands with who's listening to it and stays with them. There's so many stories that people tell that it forces the listener to have to alleviate their boredom, because there's so much extraneous nonsense where you're like, and you don't want to be rude and just go, what is the point of that? What are you trying to? Because we were just talking about people who present a certain face, but they're actually false underneath that face. So now you're telling me the story, which I assume is going to illustrate that point, but I see no way that we're going to get to that, and I've had to tune out so many, and it's tragic. I feel terrible. I don't ever want to be mean, but it's just like, oh, there was this nice back and forth of the conversation, then now you've got the ball and you're just standing there with it, like, no, it's why I don't go play pickup basketball games, because it would ruin everybody's fun. And I know that enough about me that I'm like, look at the flow and the back and forth. Why would I jump into the middle of that and go, I'm doing this too?
Right.
But
obviously people are going to be like that in the beginning. They're going to be rough on stage.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You have to, that was more an example of, I was talking about just in everyday life.
Oh, not on stage. Okay,
but if you're going to be on stage, on stage early on, that's what open mics are for. That's what free shows are for. People aren't paying to watch you develop it.
Right.
They're just watching you, and you have, but again, that comes back to the obsession. There were nights when, I remember when I was starting back in DC, there were rooms you would go up in, and there was just no one in the room. And you're like, I'm just going to go on stage and just hear what this sounds like coming out of my skull. And I remember seeing people early on, not to be judgmental of them, but there were contemporaries of mine that were like, there's no one here, I'm not going on. I'm like, oh, then you're missing the point. Like, this is right now, it's you just get on stage.
Right. Maybe you make the busboy pay attention and laugh or something.
Yeah, can you make the staff stop what they're doing?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Any way to get people's attention.
Right.
So what does your stuff look like on the page? Is it just notes about instances or
Yeah,
ideas?
more. It's like subject headings. It's almost like prompts for an improv or an acting exercise. But then I just know how the story. And again, it's not because I have any particular skill. It's just because I have been doing it for so long that I can keep this stuff organized in my head.
Right.
You know. And that's, and again, what I do is not what anyone else should be doing, and I shouldn't be doing what anyone else is doing. It's you find the best way to communicate and connect with people. Whatever that is, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm just eager to know about your process. So
My process is it's not, I don't want to describe it as a grind, but it is a go up over and over and over again and find where the story is. Now, the process of going up over and over again is really fun for me. It's not like I'm going, okay, just gotta get this out, but there's I would like to demystify a lot of what comedy is, just like anything, like songwriting, like pottery, like cooking. It is it's are you willing to do this over and over again and say yes to all the little annoyances so that you can go up and do what you do?
And so the way that your bits end up in their final form, which is how most people usually see them, they feel really well written. And it's such a fascinating process that you come by that through just telling it. Like your word choices are very particular, especially when you're doing these elaborate hyperboles. You use these wonderful, like almost like old timey words instead of modern. Just like the way you, and that's part of your voice and part of your style. But do you happen upon those words a few times when you're telling it, and then you glom on? You say, "Oh, that was a good word for that one. I'm going to hold on to that one and use that next time."
Yes,
kind of
there are moments on stage where it will come to me as a thought because, and again, it's almost like you're letting your subconscious know that it's safe to start coming out because you've gone over the mechanics of the story so much. Like, okay, we've got it. We've mapped out where it's going to go. We know where it's going to start. We know where it's going to end. Now you can start.
Now you can exaggerate
adding your little weirdness in there. It's come out, do whatever you want to do. So, yeah, that's how like little specific phrases, none of which I can think of right now. You know it when you hear it. It's like, oh, that came out of a real. It's if it's not surprising to you, then it's not going to be surprising to the audience.
Right, and it totally reads that way, like that you're enjoying the fluidness of what you're talking about. Like, just as an example, to exaggerate something, how pathetic and small something is, you describe it in a huge way.
Yeah.
So calling someone's like styrofoam coffee cup a chalice is something that you would do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you do that so often. It's a great use of hyperbole and analogy that it's very interesting to learn that that's not necessarily on the page. It's just something that once you've mapped out the story, then you start adding that sort of color over time.
I think a good example of hyperbole is in the bit I do about the slob avatar at the airport, where I'm describing. I'm in the food court section of the airport at O'Hare, and I cannot believe how polite and nice everyone's being. And I'm like, people would get up, they would give their table a courtesy wipe, and I thought to myself, we're gonna make it. Like the idea of someone wiping off a table in a food court, I have now taken to a cosmic level that the human race will go on if we're doing this. Like those small gestures lead to that. Yeah,
exactly.
But also it's hyperbole. But then part of it is like maybe that is an indication that the human race is elevated, and we're gonna. I don't like those are the kind of grandiose connections I make in the day, and a lot of times which all of us make.
Sure.
We don't. I think the comedian's job is to slow down and go, oh, wait a minute, that was actually a moment. Let's keep that. Whereas a lot of people, those are just thoughts that go through their day, and then they just move on through their day.
Yeah. And it can be a little thing that you notice or a reaction to a current event.
Yeah.
They all seem to have that feeling. I like that, the way you're describing that. It's like, let's all pause for a moment. It's kind of why the audience is there. You know, they're there to have someone pause and be like the chorus, the Greek chorus for them for a little bit.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. Film, music, comedy, it's the audience is just sitting, and I'm letting someone else who's taken the time to like maybe unpack some of life to then unpack.
To say, here's what you've seen so far.
And then maybe I can then go out and use that when I'm looking at things. You know, that's a really interesting way to, Because I always got so much of that out of film, especially when you get into another character's head, like when they do a movie about it, like what would normally be someone who would be like an extra in your life, but they focus on their life, and then it makes you relook at the world. We're like, well, what's that person? What's that story that I'm encountering, if only for 2 seconds? If I'm going up to a cashier at a fast food place, what story are they dealing with that I'm only an extra in?
Right.
You know?
And also, like in a movie, it would be an exploration of the theme from a different viewpoint.
Right.
So whatever the theme of the movie is, what's that cashier's story or whatever.
Right.
And that's something I want to talk to you about too, is your acting. You obviously got started in comedy and stand-up. Mm-hmm. And as we know, so many stand-ups are just naturally brilliant actors. They are able to play other characters and they're able to act things out. And they can do really serious and they can do really comedic. How did you find that transition just from comedy to acting in terms of the craft and all the like business that you have to learn to be an actor?
I kind of backed into it. I got a lot of my early roles because people would see me doing stand-up and would, oh, he could do that. You know, that's how I got King of Queens. And
right. Was that your first big acting part?
That was my first like big, like, oh wow, I'm a regular on a show right now.
Yeah.
And that was also one of those things where I had to realize very early on, watching like Kevin James and Jerry Stiller, how good they were, like how genuinely brilliant. You know, Kevin James had been doing acting for years in community theater. Like he had these incredibly deep chops and like presence. And I had enough of a ego to watch myself in the first 2 seasons go, I need to work on this and get, like I'm merely adequate. And I started working with like a coach, just someone to bounce, even if I had like 4 or 5 lines, like, can I make this, like it, I started treating acting the way I treated stand up. Okay, let's actually watch this and look at it and try to get better at it. So, and I was very fortunate that, King of Queens gave me that job for 9 years. So they basically paid me to learn how to act, which was very rare, but
absolutely.
I was very fortunate.
Did you learn anything in particular from Jerry Stiller or Kevin James?
Yes. Well, Kevin James has this, he so reminds me of Jackie Gleason.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
He is such a physically powerful person.
Yes.
But he can be so delicate and he's also really good. And there's a really subtle thing that he does where he plays this guy that thinks that his movements and his verbalizations are subtle, but he doesn't realize how huge they're being, which is so hilarious. Like he does these things where he acts like a guy that like, I think I'm getting something over in this moment, but he's all id. Right. And a lot of actors don't like to play like someone who thinks they're being really smart, but maybe they're not the smartest person in the room. Like,
right.
And he's just so comfortable with himself and able to pull that off, especially if you watch like old King of Queens, like from the get-go, his just physicality was amazing. So to be that comfortable with yourself is it's not easy. And then Jerry Stiller he had this thing where sometimes it would almost hurt the show. He was able to make lines funny that didn't need to be funny, like just set up lines like the way he would come into a room and go, I'm literally laughing at this, the way he would go, hello, Douglas. He would call, because Kevin James's character was named Doug, but he would always say Douglas. And the way he would say it, he was just in his own weird rhythm, but again, not doing it to be weird or to get attention. He was just like, this is how I talk. And just these, everyone talks about Christopher Walken's weird phrasing and pauses, but Jerry Stiller like had that before Christopher Walken, just the weird way he'll randomly stress words and
yes.
Or he'll like start a sentence and then stop and try to find it. He just is. He really can personify someone who is just a skin suit full of nerves, trying to deal with, and it's always hilarious. It just, but he was also he was a, because if you watch him when he's young and like Lovers and Other Strangers and Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, he was always great, but he just kept acting until he reached this almost Zen master level, which I think came from A, some inherent skill that he had, but then B, he had just did it for so long that he was able to create his own rhythm. You know what I mean? So there's part of it, like, I'm very excited to see what will happen, because I'm going to stay with this forever. I'm just going to keep doing stand-up and keep writing. Wonderful. So what will happen if I just keep doing it? Will I find new ways and new different ways to approach it?
And he kept doing comedy, too, with Stiller and Mirror while he was
kept
acting.
doing stuff.
So
and
he'd be on the same track.
There's stories they would tell me about, the early 60s when they would, because I was like, I just went up to San Francisco. I saw the Hungry Eye, and they were like, oh, me and Ann did the Hungry Eye. I'm like, oh, wow, did you ever, like, see Lenny Bruce? Like, that's a myth. He would never do those places. He always did the strip clubs because they paid more money. So he'd be down the street at the Condor, and we'd be at the Hungry Eye, and then we'd go see him the Late Show at the Condor, where he was reading his transcripts, and the audience was, like, walking. It was just fascinating. Like, they were, like, Stiller and Mears would finish a show at the Hungry Eye, walk down the street and go see Lenny Bruce. Like, that's just so fascinating to me.
Yes. So it's interesting to hear you mention about being comfortable in your own skin, that quality Kevin James has. That's something I feel from you immensely on stage and on a talk show.
That's not how it started, though. Like, it took a long time to get, because if you look at my early stand-up and talk show appearances, I am very aware and very nervy, and it's,
And did that come with just practice?
It came from practice. It came from failure, doing stuff where either something would go horribly wrong on stage, or I would do a panel bit and it didn't quite click, and I'd wake up the next day and, oh, the world didn't end. Oh, okay. We're okay. We can keep going. So that kind of thing.
You had the weight of that on your shoulders prior.
Yeah, you have to fail sometimes. You have to fail, wake up, the world kept rolling. You also have to succeed. Because, but for the same reason, you have to succeed and wake up the next day and go, okay, now it's a new day. Like, I've had so many people that were like, I remember coming up, they would have some amazing set and go, that set 2 weeks ago, that kind of, like, yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. You got to move on. Like, I think people are still buzzing about it. They're not. They enjoyed watching it. They woke up the next morning and they had to get on with their lives, and so do you. And there's a lot of people that they kind of live in that moment, and you're like, you got to wake up and keep doing it, man.
I hear you. The way you're able to talk about yourself and your feelings, and if you're embarrassed or humiliated or feel imperfect, like a lot of performers, when they go out at first, they're anxious. They're really nervous about exposing any vulnerable side.
Yeah.
And you're so comfortable with that, and it makes you so much more likable and confident. Well, to be able to be open about all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I try to be so patient with young comedians. When you're young as a comedian, you can always tell a younger comedian, because their act is more about pointing out this stupid thing and look at this dumb thing, and here's another brilliant thing I said, which is all my act was, because I was so insecure, and then as you get older, your act's more about, listen to this stupid shit I did. Oh my God. Okay. Like, because
you realize that stupid shit includes you.
Exactly. And you connect with the audience so much harder when you're able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your love of movies and comic books and geeky stuff. Because
pop cultural ephemera.
Yes.
Yeah.
So back before the internet, there was always the guy in the room who knew every movie and every actor who you could tap into. And I feel like you would have been that guy who just remembered that stuff and cared about it so much.
Well, remembered stuff, loved all of the weird urban legends and stories about it, always loved all of the, am I saying it right? Samizdat?
I don't know that word.
It's like a Russian term for underground stuff that's passed around.
Okay.
So like videotapes of like the farting preacher or
those old cassette tapes with the
oh my God
best entertainment guy with the shows that Kimby gave. Remember that guy? was a voicemail recording of a guy saying he had the best shows. And
Oh, yes.
remember that guy? I forget what it's
And
called.
I love proving people wrong. I know exactly. Yeah,
I forgot the name of it already.
All the voicemail stuff, the cinnamon prank calls, the Tube Bar prank calls, the Garden Grove prank calls,
All that
all
stuff.
of the
red
Jerry
stuff.
Lewis, and then all the then I mean, again, this is before you started getting YouTube and CD
Right.
compilations of like celebrities at their worst and
The outtakes and all that
all
stuff.
the outtakes.
Yeah.
I had the early Jerky Boys tapes before they were ever. It was just a thing stuff that was passed around. Yeah. Army Man magazine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All that stuff. It was just that I love the fact that in the workaday world, people are getting up and having breakfast and going to a job and making the world run, and then their spare time they're just creating something, not to make money off of it. I mean, eventually, yeah, they want to do it because that will lead to writing jobs and stuff, but I just need this out there. I need this to be out there, and I need to pass that around. And that the feel of that stuff to me is always. I have a friend, April Richardson, who still does printed zines, which now has become a nostalgic thing.
Yeah.
But she just loves the look and feel of them. All my friends now, my age, are suddenly purchasing cassette tapes. They're re-releasing all these 80s and 90s albums on cassette because people are the nostalgia. Remember how LPs came back, but actually for a legitimate reason.
For
because
DJs and stuff.
Not only DJs, they actually do sound better than stuff on iTunes.
They have higher harmonics.
There's a certain, but
than CDs.
Cassette tapes do not sound good. Absolutely do not last.
No.
That is a pure nostalgic comfort quest being put out.
Yeah.
That people are doing. It's so weird.
I didn't know that was happening because I still have cassettes.
All my friends' Instagram pages are
cassettes.
Look at all these cassettes. Oh my God, I rebought these. Now, I do like when people have, and there's gorgeous pictures of people's mixtapes, their old mixtapes all together, which are amazing.
Yeah.
Because the lettering and the decorating you would do on those,
absolutely.
I would do that
Paint
all
them
the time.
And just like use white out and like anything.
Yeah, and you would like cut out the piece
Take
of paper.
the sticker off of the cassette.
Yeah, but also like if you would get those blank ones, the
blank cassette
but you would take the paper that was in it out, put it on another piece of paper to cut it out if you wanted a certain color, and then you would do your own handwriting, and oh my God, the best.
So does that connect with your comedy, or is that kind of a separate arena for you? Your obsession with that cultural
if there's
errata?
a certain thing that, if there's a certain part of that world that I think I can link to something bigger about life, absolutely. I mean, so many of my early things, the Tom Carvel bit, and the bit about 80s metal, and the bit about Deathbed, the bed that eats, like all these weird little, the Robert Evans, his whole thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I'm doing a show in Cleveland, Ohio, the audience is not going to go, oh yeah, the early 70s movie producer Robert Evans. Like, but you make people, if you're obsessed enough with it and that you're like, oh my God, people are like, I'm into it. I mean, one of my first bits I remember really kind of like being this is a bit that I can close on, was all about William Alexander and Bob Ross. And this, the
Bob Ross from
Bob Ross, the painter.
The guy from PBS, gotcha.
Bob Ross. But the other guy on PBS was this guy named William Alexander, who was Bob Ross's he was like his Yoda. And he was this short German guy that was about, painting, but he was just the almighty brush, you are God. And I would, people didn't know what the fuck that was, but I made them understand it, and it was great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you make like little radio skits as a youngster on cassette?
We would do. I remember my friends and I would do like weird radio like plays. We didn't do like one of our friends got a video camera. We would do like shoot like fake commercials on it. One of those big bulky
like,
but yeah,
early 80s
that you had to plug into
mid
the
80s.
VCR. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we would do that.
I mean, I assume that stuff was valuable to you because you're like experimenting, you're making comedy, and you're having fun.
Seeing how you look, seeing how you sound,
Absolutely.
Seeing how something that you think sounds funny when you say it, but then on screen you're like, oh, that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is great. Little accidents that ended up working, that you're like, oh, I didn't know that would, oh, okay, cool, Right.
Did you do comedy, or were you trying to do cool science fiction stuff, or what kind of stuff were you making?
For me, it was mostly comedy, although I do remember my friends, we were obsessed with the movie Jaws.
Yeah.
And we were going. My friend's dad had a boat, but like just a small boat. But we were going to remake Jaws using and I transcribed the movie Jaws. Watch. My friend had it on a laser disc, and I typed out all the dialogue from that movie, and we were going to use the script to like shoot it, and I mean all of it. And that's so wonderful.
One of the nerdier things I've ever heard.
Oh yeah. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, we got to get a shooting script first, then we'll shoot. We never did it, but we were in our minds like we're going to do it, and it made me feel justified later when that those two kids remade Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
Remember that?
And they got a lot of attention for that.
A lot of it, yeah, because it was
Shot for
really
shot.
well done.
I know.
They did it, and they found a way to do it with no money, and like, how do we recreate this?
I wonder what happened with them, if they got some sort of opportunity.
I don't know. I mean, I know that Spielberg was very aware of it and loved it, because that's how he started as a kid, just
Absolutely.
messing around. And so,
he made his own movies just like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Jaws was practically one of those movies. He was like barely 20 years old when he made that.
I made a lot of movies with my Super 8 camera, a lot of horror movies. We would do like slasher movies, Caro syrup and red food coloring and toilet paper would make mangled flesh. And we would do a thing. I had never seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I remember seeing all these pictures of it. So I had formed a different movie in my mind based on these pictures out of context. And then I wanted to like... So I did something with the Virginia Weed Eater Massacre, which is on my first Comedy Central DVD as a bonus thing.
Oh, great.
Me and my friends in my backyard, and just like, found a monster and a weird white mask, and just like, it was so weird.
You meant for it to be a scary horror movie, but does it play as comedy?
There's comedic bits because we're just goofing around. Like, well, how do we... Because I didn't understand, like, cutting. It was like, okay, the camera's locked down. Come in and do stuff, so... Did
you subscribe to those or find at the grocery store those magazines like Fangoria or the Cinologue, or what was that one that... like, it would tell you how to do those tricks with the blood.
Yeah. Well, there was... I didn't get... I got... Definitely got Fangoria, where they would show, Tom Savini basically like doing old vaudeville theater tricks, because it all had to be done in camera. Like, when we build a fake body, and then he's put it, and we'll stab him, and Kevin Bacon will lie in bed, and we'll put an arrow through him, and So yeah, that kind of stuff was like, it was just I didn't know. No one knows how to get in, so you just start doing stuff, and then. You grab whatever thread, and you hope that thread leads to a thicker rope, and that leads you all the way in.
Yeah, and you love it, so you just keep doing it, and wherever it takes you, it takes you.
Yeah.
I want to kind of get into how you ended up settling on stand-up, since you have so many varied interests in entertainment, that was the one that you pursued the most heavily. Because I was very similar to you, but I pursued writing.
Yeah.
And didn't go on stage.
I had started writing, but then I don't... because it was one of those summers, it was the summer between freshman and sophomore year of college, which I think is the first time when most people start thinking like, oh, real life is coming. I got to figure out what to do. I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
I don't really have any ambition to do anything. So that was that summer that I tried all these different, I was a wedding DJ. I worked in offices as a temp. I was I was starting like paralegal training almost.
Oh, wow.
And doing indexes of testimony, and creating stuff for lawyers, and oh god,
you missed your calling.
Really did. And then I was also a columnist. I was covering sports under my own name. And then I was a columnist under a fake name, like for a local newspaper, like a teen thing.
So you tried a bunch of different stuff.
It was like, and I was trying, because I'm like, anything, what will stick?
Right.
And then I started doing open mics on Tuesday nights in DC at Garvin's, which is now gone. It's a place called Garvin's. And all those other jobs paid okay, and but if I'd lost those jobs, I would have gone like, okay, I'll do something else. But stand-up, which paid nothing, and it was all negativity, but the minute I went into that club and saw comedians sitting around bouncing jokes off of each other, and that was their life, I'm like, this life's for me. I like this hang. I like these hours. This is for me. This is what I want. Like, I just knew it.
Yeah.
You know it when you see it.
No, I hear you. The hours are the rough thing though. Now that you're an adult and you have
Now it's although now at least I can go. I'm not embarrassed to go. I need to go on early, and then I'm going to leave.
right.
And I hope you understand. They're like, oh yeah, you're 50.
You're
Go
allowed
home.
that,
Yeah. I opened up for She and Him at the Ace Hotel, and the first night, Friday, because I had a bunch of stuff to do the next day with my daughter. I'm like, I'm going to open your show, and I'm going to go home, guys. And they were cool. And then the second night, I brought my wife, and we stayed and watched them. It was beautiful. They're all Christmas songs, M.O.D.O.K and Zoe Deschanel. But and both when I talked to M and Zoe, they were like, "Oh, absolutely, go home." Like because we all have kids now, we get it. No one's insulted. Like you're not gonna stay,
Just having to wait, starting at 10 p.m. for a slot at an open mic night is just the lifestyle is brutal.
It's brutal,
and all
it's good if you're young,
yeah,
or if you're single. If you decide to stay single, then you absolutely do it.
yeah, if you like staying up or whatever.
Yeah.
So where are your preferred places for workshopping material? You have your haunts.
They've gotten some younger people booking the Laugh Factory and the Comedy Store and the Improv, and they're booking really more interesting acts. And there's something about those because those rooms are such meat and potatoes that it really makes you edit and hone your stuff. You've got to make it work. I just saw Eric Andre ran his Netflix special early upstairs to the Belly Room because he wanted to see like how crazy can I get in this smaller space, and it was fascinating. Like they're letting way more innovative, way more risk-taking comedians like take these stages, and it's fucking great.
So what do you mean meat and potatoes? Mean like the people who come in are tourists and they just want...
They're not. It's not an alt comedy crowd. It's a hey, we'd like to see a show, and alt comedy is great for writing and experimentation. But I want my stuff to. I still want to do a show. I don't want to go do a show that amuses my 8 hipster friends in the back, and then we all laugh about the squares that didn't get it later
I hear
on.
what you're saying.
That's fine for a small window in your 20s. But then, okay, why the fuck are you doing this now? Like, figure out a way to make this work. Everyone talks about, but Andy Kaufman, that dude's like, Andy Kaufman had a fucking act that killed. It was innovative, but it killed, and he took it to fucking colleges and made tons of money with it. He wasn't like, they did that thing in that Man on the Moon movie where he goes up and hate fucks an audience by reading The Great Gatsby, but he didn't do that at colleges. He knew how to do fucking amazing comedy.
Yeah, and that's the thing the nerds often forget about Andy Kaufman is that even in that weird stuff that he did, there were comic beats in it that a meat and potatoes audience
he would
totally
rehearse and make sure that they worked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he knew how to kill in front of an audience.
Absolutely. Even the ice cream eating.
Yes.
It was perfectly timed and escalated beautifully, and the regular people who aren't into avant-garde comedy were totally loving it.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah.
So it just, but I think a lot of people have used that as a crutch to go.
But I can be crazy.
I just barely slapped this together.
Right.
Who knows? And this is what real comedy is. I remember seeing there were some alt comedy message boards back in the day, and they would literally it was like a cult. They would go, I went and saw that they would go to the see Comedy Death Ray at the M Bar, and the one comedian that would eat it because they weren't really ready and go, that was the only stuff I liked, man. Like Todd Glass went up and Patton Oswalt went up and Sarah went up, and they would you could tell they were rehearsed. And I just, and then I'm not going to, but someone went up and didn't have a great set, some very big alt comedy hero. And you're like, that's the kind of real stuff. It's like, and after the show, we were all hanging out, and that guy was like, "Oh, I just wasn't fucking. My shit wasn't working,
Right.
But there was these people going, "I've got to show that I'm getting the stuff that No, he was embarrassed by that.
That's the thing you don't really hear talked about anymore. It was a big topic in the 90s, the whole idea of art versus entertainment, selling out versus appeasing an audience.
Well, they don't talk about that anymore because everyone it became very clear very quickly that the people who were screaming "sell out" the loudest were the ones who didn't have anything that anyone wanted to buy, and that's why they were yelling "sell out." And there's nothing wrong with making a living at what you do creatively. Why the fuck would you begrudge anyone going and being paid for what they like to do.
was a weird
I've never
era.
understood that.
Yeah, it was a weird time when that was frowned upon.
But again, that was such a small window because the few people that started to make it realized, oh no, this is actually really nice.
Yes,
To get to be paid and work with other creative people that are also professionals who want to do a good job,
Right.
who actually want to show up and make sure the product is good and that we can all be proud of it. Why is that bad? I don't know why that was ever a bad thing. I mean, and you know, a lot of people that like, it was very ironic because a lot of those people that were, a lot of their touchstones they worshipped, The Onion, Mr. Show, those things were slaved over. Like those things were not slapped together. People worked really fucking hard to make sure those were good.
And were accessible to all levels of
Yes.
audience, not just the geeks.
Yes, so that
Right.
kind of like, I don't know. I've never understood the fashion of the fashionably not trying. I've never gotten that.
Yeah, nor have I.
Again, that's cute for a couple times, but then it's like, okay, you're doing the easiest fucking shit.
Yeah.
Going up and not trying, or hate fucking the audience.
Right.
Oh wow, how'd you pull that off?
Then it's barely distinguishable from performance art at that point.
And by the way, I don't want to say it because 90% of performance art is slaved over and thought out and really worked on. You know, like the people look at the most memorable, easy, kind of risible aspects of it, and they use that as their touchstone. It's like, no, if you actually look at really good performance art, they've clearly worked this out, what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And
You know, you're looking at a hack comedian's version of what performance art is.
what is your opinion of comedy as an art versus entertainment? Do you think of it as an art at all, or do you just think of it as entertainment?
Yeah, the art comes from entertaining people. The art comes out of finding a way to take a diverse room full of strangers and bring them all together in that moment of either epiphany or realization or hilarity. That's where the art is. And what's beautiful about the art of stand-up is it doesn't look like art. It looks like entertainment. But, you know, whereas capital A, art is the viewer is looking at the art. But the art of stand-up involves the viewer. The audience is part of the artwork. That's how I've always seen it. No, actually, no, that's not true. I didn't always see it that way. That's only come in the last couple of years. Like when you're young, you're either looking at it totally as art or totally as entertainment, and you don't see how those two things are joined. And as you get older and do it long enough, you go, oh no, the art is when you get a group full of strangers to laugh at something that they normally wouldn't laugh at. That's where the art is. But you are not the art alone. They are not viewing you, the piece of art, separate from them. You and the audience are the artwork. You are the installation piece, and it's either clicking or it isn't.
That's a good way to see it, because it's not you just putting out your thoughts and feelings and they can interpret it however they want. You have a specific goal
Yeah.
that you want a certain emotional reaction from them.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be the entire audience is laughing all the time. There are those great moments when you'll say something and a couple people in the audience really get it and the other people don't, but they're not resentful. They're just like, oh, but it's all part of the flow. And then, but then, you know, this part of the audience will laugh, the other part won't, then the other part will laugh, and then everyone will come together on one thing, and that's the art. Like that's those moments are incredible.
What do you make of the fact that the touristy or the meat and potatoes type places now are more open to more avant-garde or experimental comedy? Do you think that stuff has just become kind of mainstream or commodified? Or
No, I think that the audience has become more sophisticated because of stuff like YouTube, and because you can type in Fernwood Tonight or SCTV and understand, like, oh wow, there was a whole if you see someone who's huge now, or watch someone in a film and go, what did they used to do? And you can go back and see SCTV or see, like, you know, Key and Peele started on Mad TV. You know, you can go see them on there. Like, you can go back and see where people sprung from. And it's really, you know, there's people who love Better Call Saul who do not know what Mr. Show is.
Sure.
But I'm jealous of them because they're going to get to discover it. And they're going to get to see it for the first time, the way that I saw it for the first time, and go, oh my God. So that we're now, it's like now I'm in this phase of my life, and maybe that where I think that stereotype of the person that's like, you've never seen Apocalypse Now? What the fuck's wrong with you? That's gone away, and now but that's still there, but it's like, you haven't seen oh, you're going to get to see that. Oh, it's going to be great. I'm so jealous. You're going to get to do something I'll never get to do again, which is experience something for the first time. Like when I meet someone who's never seen Fleabag or never seen Lodge 49, I'm like, you're going to get to sit and watch that. You're going to get to experience that. You're going to get to read Catherine Dunn's Geek Love for the first time. Like, I'll never get to do that again. And so I get excited when someone tells me like, oh, you've never seen this. Wait till you see it. That's really, I have nieces and nephews in their late teens and early 20s. And it was a couple years ago, they did not know who Jack Nicholson was. Wow. Because why would they?
Yeah.
Why would they?
Right.
Because he stopped doing films,
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't want to be your snotty older uncle, but you're going to get to see Chinatown someday. You're going to get to see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and you're going to get to discover this genuinely amazing thing that you didn't know existed. When I was like 11 years old, I was up late one night and the Maltese Falcon came on. I'd never heard of Humphrey Bogart. Because why would I know what that was? And I was just like, oh, what is this? And I got to discover it.
It happened to me with It's a Wonderful Life. It was on late night, and I didn't know who Jimmy Stewart was. I was like 17 or something. It was on Christmas. Old black and white movie. I was tired. I couldn't sleep. An hour or so into it, I'm sobbing. And I'm like, What is this? Magic.
My friend Brian
thing.
Posehn had never seen It's a Wonderful Life, and I think he saw it for the first time like 2 years ago.
Good
and
for
I
him.
was so jealous. Like, you're going to get to it.
Right.
And he was, because he had only seen like the little bits that you see. He's like, it just looks cheesy. And then he watched it. He was like, damn, that movie's fucking dark. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
People don't understand the levels that movie goes to.
Right.
And it just made me like that kind of stuff there. And I'm still happy that there are classic films I've never seen, The Best Years of Our Lives or Dr. Zhivago or Gaslight. Like, I'll eventually see them, but there's always, you realize there's amazing stuff that you haven't seen from the past, and there's always amazing new stuff coming from the future that you don't know is coming, and you're going to get to see it. When the Watchmen show was going to be on HBO, I had my arms crossed, like, how fucking dare you?
Right.
That is and I just watched the finale last night. Maybe one of the best TV shows I've ever fucking seen in my life, from something that should not have worked, and oh my fucking God.
That's great.
One of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen, because there's people always creating stuff. Why not look for that? All these people that, and this was true of boomers that were older than me, but sadly it's true of my fellow Gen Xers, the people that are like, hasn't been any good music since Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. It's like, no, there's been a ton of good music since then. And then people my age that are like, hasn't been anything good since OK Computer. No, there's a ton of great new shit.
Yeah,
You're just not
feel
exposing yourself to it. And it'll always continue to be fucking great.
I feel like there's an onslaught. Like, there's so much more now because media has been democratized.
Yeah.
And as a pop culture connoisseur like yourself, like, how do you even keep up? Because people will tell me about a great TV show. I'll have never heard of it, and it's been on for 6 seasons.
I know.
How do you...
I don't worry about keeping up. What I worry about is, how do I make my life as enriched as I possibly can? But it's not about checking off everyone else's boxes. It's, what am I interested in, and what am I spending my time doing? Because I could just as easily be watching crappy shit, but I'm not. I'm taking my time to watch and listen to really, really good stuff, and also just be open to stuff. No, I can't sit. I don't have the hours of the day to sit and listen to all the new music, but I can have music playing in the background while I'm doing stuff. True. And maybe like, what the fuck is that? Oh, and you constantly discover it. So I'm very lucky that I have friends that are big movie and music geeks. So like my friends Blaine Capatch and Edgar Wright are always sending me Spotify lists of like these 9 new. I'm like, oh my God. And they're always
That's
like
handy.
Great new stuff. So I can, just keep yourself open. Don't be driven. If you're driven to, there's a great, if you're driven to always get the newest, latest thing, no matter what, there's a great line from a writer named Garrett Kaiser, which is, to avoid being dinosaurs, we make ourselves sheep. And so, got to get the latest iPhone. I got to get the late. You've to avoid being one animal, you've become another animal.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great saying. So what kind of stuff are you working on now besides stand-up?
I am working on...
You're doing a movie later today, or...
I'm doing a voiceover thing later today for I'm doing a TV show for Hulu and Marvel called M.O.D.O.K, which is a very obscure Marvel villain. And I was this was a great thing because I'm producing the show too, and I really got to work with a writing staff and another producer, this writer, Jordan Blum, who's a fucking genius. And we took this very ironically silly Marvel character and kind of built a world around them. Like,
That's
what would
fantastic.
that look like? And I don't know if people are going to like it or not, but the process of doing it was, it grew so many new muscles for me that it was really fascinating.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You did your last special on
Netflix.
Netflix, right. The Netflix people.
The Netflix people.
And that's the way to do a stand-up special now? It's no more Comedy Central, it's Netflix?
Well, I mean, no, there's Comedy Central, FX is doing them, Amazon's doing them, Netflix. There's so many new platforms for so many new voices.
Right.
And it's great because all of these newer, younger voices that normally wouldn't get, because people need content.
There's more channels now, yeah.
And they're open to like, let's see what, and they're realizing that there's way more of an audience than the 18 to 35-year-old white male. Like, there's a way bigger audience out there. So why not give these people a voice and a,
Right.
yeah.
So that must be a fun time when you have an hour and it's solid and you can go and do it.
It's the best. And now, although it's frustrating, I remember Mitch Hedberg said this to me, because you tape the hour, you do the special, and then you torn it for a little bit, like until it comes out. And then you think of all these new tags and different things. You're like, God fucking damn it, I could have, or you find a way. He said this was what really drove him crazy. He's like, you have this bit and you realize if you take 3/4 of the bit out of it, you have this killer fucking joke that doesn't need all this other shit you had in it. And you're like, oh, fuck, why do I have the big bloated version when right in the middle was this goddamn pearl? It was right there.
But then can't you pepper those in later when you're working on new material?
But when you're working on new material, if as long as the audience isn't paid for it, you.
But don't people want like a greatest hits on occasion? They like to hear
maybe.
old bits?
I mean, maybe when I'm older, but I just feel like that's a very just disgustingly egotistical thing to do. Like, here are my greatest hits. And how long have you been doing comedy? Like, shouldn't greatest hits be something that people put together for you after you've died? Like, are you deciding that? Like, no.
Oh, that's a good way to see it. I went to see Jay Leno in the 80s, and I had seen him on Letterman do all his bits, and he was so good on Letterman.
Jesus Christ.
So funny. And he did all the same bits that I'd seen him do on TV in his show.
But live, I remember I saw him, I was at Wolf Trap in Virginia, which is this big outdoor music venue. Still there, beautiful. And I was a teenager, I think it was like 14 or 15. There's like bands, but he was part of the show. And there's just people like wandering around this lawn, like getting beer. It's like this big open area. And this fucking dude comes on and just starts talking. There have been bands on before him. And this dude comes on, and the whole lawn just stopped, because he was so fucking good. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and that was one of the things, I guess subconsciously, I'm like, maybe I want to do that someday. And then I saw him again years later once I started doing comedy in Richmond. And just as a live stand-up, it bums me out that there's a generation that does not understand what a ludicrously great stand-up Jay Leno was and still is. When you see him live now, when he's a guest on something, he's just sharp and fast and like...
Yeah, and such a professional. He could adjust what he did for the audience. Like when he got the Tonight Show, he's like, oh, my audience is old people now. It's not the college kids anymore.
Yeah.
And his comedy became different. And so many people in that younger generation were like, Jay Leno, he's like a hack. And like, no, you don't realize he's a professional because he knows his audience.
Yeah, the thing that drove me crazy about the Tonight Show with me was he didn't have to adjust what he did, though.
I agree. I don't think he had to.
Because his stuff was so fucking sharp. Because I've seen him in front of audiences full of old people, and they're just losing their shit at his stuff, how fucking funny he was. And then I don't know why he did that. Because it would have, and that drove me crazy. And he's still, and for people my age that are comedians who, you can be frustrated with how he did the Tonight Show, but to then go, and he wasn't an influence on me. It's like, well, you're fucking lying.
Right.
I'm sorry, you're lying. Look, I think he's a disgusting criminal who should die in jail, but Bill Cosby as a comedian was a fucking influence on me, and I have to accept that. And people that are like, never had any influence. No, you're lying. You can say both. Right. It's okay, No,
that's a good attitude. Do people offer you shows, like your own show or a talk show or anything like that?
I've been offered a couple of talk shows. I just think I'd be terrible at it. Like when you see what people like Conan and it's so fucking hard. There's a select group of people that can do that, and I'm just not one of them.
I feel like your show would be more like an Eric Andre or an Andy Kaufman show.
Well, also because I'm all id a lot of the times, and a lot of the times, like, you have to hide when you've got a shitty guest, and I would just be like,
that'd be so rough.
Why the fuck did you come on here then if you don't want to talk? This is stupid.
Or pretend to like their movie that you hated.
Or like, I saw your movie. I sent us a screener. It's not good, and you're fucking good. Why did you do that movie?
Right, that would not
If they
last.
would let me do that show, then I would do it. I would just be like, because I'd be this whiny film geek, like, dude, why did you do that?
Well, I look forward to that show.
It'll never happen. Because all those shows now are run by publicists.
Sure.
Basically publicist driven. Like the old Tonight shows, people forget, like talk shows, people would come on with nothing to plug. They just came on and just talked.
I remember
What are you doing? Nothing.
And they weren't scripted conversations.
No, and it was just like, and so there was a lot of chaff. There was a lot of like dead air.
Right.
But part of the moments that clicked was like, oh my God, nothing was happening, and now this is happening.
Johnny Carson, like in the
Holy
70s.
shit.
It was so bizarre.
It was a 90-minute show. So they had to have on like Buddy Hackett, but then like some weird author.
Joyce Brothers would come on.
Yeah, like fucking Alejandro Jodorowsky did the Tonight Show.
Who is that?
The guy that did El Topo and the Holy Mountain. He was because they needed warm bodies out there. So he's like, Johnny, blood inside the body is life, but outside it is death. A paradox, no? And Johnny's like, what the hell? It's like,
oh, that's very interesting.
Can we get red buttons out here or something? What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of, we're missing. That's one of the things that I missed about. I still like watching Bill Maher in real time, but he really it's once a week, so his guests are all very elevated. When he did Politically Incorrect, it was the weirdest fucking grab bag of people, and sometimes they would bring on what you thought was kind of a fun celebrity, but no one particularly profound, and they would come on and say these weirdly like, oh my God, John Tesh, thanks, dude. John Tesh was on Politically Incorrect, and he did one of it was funny, but also weirdly profound observations about how shopping malls work. And it was such a Neil Postman, Mark Crispin Miller, like media deconstruction of how it was, where he's like, you're in the mall and you're looking at the stores from a distance, like, oh, just magnets. Oh, that's stupid. They just sell magnets. And then you get closer to it. If you get within 20 feet, you're like, oh, that magnet looks like a little scoop of jelly beans. That's actually pretty clever. And he goes, the next thing you know, you're in line with 5 magnets. You're like, what am I doing? Like, that the breaking down the process of how these stores pull you in it was very funny, but it was also like, there's something kind of real and human and sinister in that. Yeah, John Tesh, like, it was amazing.
The whole idea that you're seeing these people who you think are just so vapid based on their entertainment careers, have this whole other side to them where they have political opinions that you're finally getting to see.
But this was beyond like a political opinion. This was a real
cultural critique
thing about like a cultural and a human critique of like, and also one of those rare critiques where he's like, I'm critiquing a thing that I have completely been suckered in by. And I'm telling you this because I've seen it happen. Like, it was amazing.
Right.
So those little moments of like, oh, wow.
So then after your special comes out, you're working on new material. How long does it take you to develop a new hour and record a new special?
Probably like a year and a half. You would normally, it wouldn't take that. I wish I was more prolific, but with all the other stuff that I do, the writing and the acting, it just takes longer. I don't have the time to go out there's some nights where I'm like, I'd like to be in bed at 9 o'clock and go to sleep. When's my call time tomorrow? Yeah, I'm going to be in bed. Wow. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to stay at the club till 2 a.m., do a line of Coke, and then go to set 5 a.m. the next morning. Those days.
Those days are gone. What about the writing that you do? Are you doing shows that you've sold? Are you talking about writing your own material? Or
yeah, I mean, M.O.D.O.K. I co-wrote with Jordan Blum. There's another show that I'm trying to develop that I'm writing. I mean, I would like to get more into like writing and directing. That's really the track I'm going for right now.
That's great.
That's where I'm headed.
Do you find that a difficult transition to go from performing to writing when you don't have an audience to?
There is that you miss the immediate gratification. So right now I'm in that I'm trying to do like writing sprints every day, but it's hard, man. You get distracted.
Hard. Yeah, no, writing is rough.
You know what it's like.
I do.
What are you working on? You are always doing what are you working on?
And this won't be part of the show, but we'll still talk into our mics anyway. Thank you for listening to the How to Write Funny podcast. If you want more episodes of the podcast, as well as tons of free resources for comedy writers to get better at writing comedy, visit howtowritefunny.com.